Well, I think there are a growing number of people clocking on to our 1 o'clock slot. I think the 1 o'clock beeps will have sounded at the BBC and also at Westminster. But we'll just give it, folks, just a minute or two, just for one or two people to get back to their computer. And then we will get cracking. Do appreciate people who have got here in good time. So just slurp that cup of coffee and get yourselves ready. We have got a format today where we you are able to speak and be on video, those of you that are joining us. So do please, once we get going, if you do want to butt in and ask a question, please do so. I will do my damnedest as chairman to control you all, and if I can manage to do that in this virtual environment, I will do. So I think at 1:01, I'm going to make a start. I'm conscious of everybody's busy lives, and I don't know about you as an audience group here today, but I think things are beginning to return very much more to normal. As it happens, I'm in a completely different office today. I've travelled a couple of hours from my home to be at a meeting with other people. I was in one of our Quill offices yesterday as well in a different part of the country. So I think things are getting busier, and so I'm conscious that people time for these things isn't quite as much as it used to be. So today is another webinar in the Quill Uncovers series. We are having another look at LinkedIn as a marketing tool, how best to use it, trying to take a step-by-step guide to how best to use LinkedIn. And if I just move on to the next slide, please. Pass on to the next one again, just to my headshots of the people in the slide. Here we go. Thank you. So today we've got myself, Julian Bryan, as Managing Director of Quill. I'm joined today by Stuart Kay, who is one of the partners at Adams Kay, and we'll see some of his LinkedIn activity and hear some of his LinkedIn activity in a moment. And also Sahar, who's a barrister who has over 30,000 followers, and uses LinkedIn effectively as a lead generation tool in his business. Sadly, Yvonne Botang cannot be with us today. She's engaging with a firm in Singapore today, and the timings just didn't work for her. Now, there is, as ever, a side panel. If you want to type in any questions you have, if we can't hear you or whatever, we need to pick up your questions. There's lots of ways that you as individuals can participate in today's webinar. You should be able to speak if you take yourself off mic, or pop a question in on the side panel. But I am going to be getting Stuart and Sahar to very much share their own personal experiences with you all today, because LinkedIn is all about explaining and understanding how it all works. So can we just pop on to the next slide, please? So just a word or two, I guess, about the commercial break before we start in terms of Quill. For those of you that don't know us, we are providing legal software, legal account software, practice management software to about 750 small and medium-sized law firms across the country, England, Wales, and Scotland. We do support Scottish accounts rules, and one or two firms or a few firms in Northern Ireland as well. Not only do we provide that software, but for those of you who need an outsourced cashiering option, we do provide outsourced cashiering, we provide outsourced payroll, outsourced typing as well. So there's a whole plethora of services that Quill does offer, that if you need, we can always talk about with you afterwards. Okay, next slide, please. Hello, folks. Right. Okay, so we're going to talk through these topics of engagement. So how do we build up our connections? How do we then create good content that someone's going to actually read? What's the role of videos? Talk a bit about the LinkedIn algorithm. We hear these words, this algorithm word being used by LinkedIn, by Facebook, and other tools, and timings. You know, how and when should you actually do your posting? And of course, you know, why are we using LinkedIn? Ultimately, we are using LinkedIn to generate business. LinkedIn is a business tool, and how do we actually convert that attention from what we're actually doing into business leads? And I know Sahar in particular has some real tangible numbers around the value that he gets from what might start off as a social media activity and effectively is converting into business. So engaging with connections. Let's go on to the next slide. And you know, what works, what doesn't work. So I mean, who wants to kick off? Stuart, do you fancy kicking off? So you know, in terms of getting more people onto your profile, what are you doing? What works for you? What doesn't work for you in terms of getting more followers, basically?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. What I tend to find is that I've got so many connections now, and I find they're probably it's quite random in as much as how the whole algorithm works in terms of, I think, if somebody views you or somebody is connected with somebody else, and then they can see what you're doing. So I've got a lot of connections sort of very indirectly, I would say. It works for me in as much as it gets my business message out there to a much greater audience. I probably quite a global audience, which is what it is. And I can't really say what doesn't work about it, because I used it in a fairly, what's the expression, low grade way. I don't have any expectations that I put on it. It really is for me a bit of a window on my world, and that's what I try to use it for. And that's where it's worked. I can't say I've generated many leads from it or business from it. It's just me. It's the only way that I know that I can present myself to the world, and perhaps that helps a little bit of the show off in me.
Indeed. So you're not. I mean, it's some people will make a great effort to go and connect with a lot of people proactively.
Yeah,
Are you sort of looking at people saying, "Oh, I want to connect with him and I want to connect with her, and that's an interesting person to follow"? Are you going down that proactive route?
no, not really. I mean, if there is a reason to connect, let's say, for example, I'm meeting somebody for the first time in business, I'll try and find them on LinkedIn. And sometimes it can be so random. If I'm going to a restaurant and I'll see who's connected with the restaurant, so invariably I'm connected with managers of the restaurants, and then you get sort of more business connections that way. But I can't say I go hunting or fishing for new connections.
Okay.
Maybe sometimes, depending on my mood, or if I see a post somebody has put and I like it, I might connect with that person. I probably ought to do it more, and but I haven't really made a great effort to do so.
Okay, Sahar, you've got, I think, over 30,000 people you're connected with now, and have you got about getting that level of connections?
Well, the first thing I'd say is anyone who's on this call, really by now, given that you're sat on this call, I would imagine you would have already, or if you haven't, I would advise you to open your LinkedIn, search for Stuart Kay, and send him a connection request. And likewise with myself, you probably won't remember in an hour's time, let alone in a day's time, but that is the way in which you start to build connections as well, because as has been mentioned, we both have fairly large networks of our own. Once you're connected to us and critically you start engaging with our content, people will see you, and they will see you because an average post that I put out gets, if it's done well, over 100,000 views. If it's not done so well, then probably about 10 to 15,000, which means that just by commenting with somebody else or on someone else's content, you don't necessarily have to create your own if you're not comfortable doing that yet, though ultimately that's a very important step. That will be a very quick and easy way for you to start engaging with the networks that we have built up. The truth is that to build up a network like the one I have has taken me about 5 years. It's taken me years and years of developing and refining content, of being consistent, of really trying to corner certain aspects of what I'm doing. There's 3 things that I focus on. One is mentoring, so I do a lot of work with students. The other one, which has already been alluded to, is business development, which is quite an important focus. And the third one really is more generally ED&I, and I suppose tangential to that is recruitment as well, because we've done a lot of recruitment through LinkedIn. That's what I tend to use it for.
Okay. So I think an important theme, and something that I know my colleagues in Quill do, is if ever we have a business meeting, obviously typically online these days, then my colleagues will make a point of connecting with the individuals who are at that meeting, following the meeting, and that in itself builds a community. I think we've got. Stuart, did you make a comment?
That's a very, I think definitely the last point Sahar mentioned of the recruitment. I mean, I found LinkedIn has been fantastic. That I'll typically post an advertisement for a job, and I'll do something a little bit quirky. So I'll put my dog on the post, sort of saying that the office spaniel is looking for a new member of staff, and I tend to get lots of agencies then contact me, which is great. People will come to me direct, which is great, or people share. And so then that expands the reach of the advertisement.
Indeed, yeah, good point. And yes, I did see that the Office Spaniel is looking for a lot of help, and it always seems to be your firm is continually growing.
He's asleep at the moment. He's down there.
Yeah, between recruitment drives. Okay, well, so building the content, we've seen that it's a process. It's an organic process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's something that that individuals need to work on, and it does take time. I think my own LinkedIn connections are knocking on the door of 3,000 now, but I've clearly got a long way to go before I catch up with Sahar in terms of that. Okay,
just to piggyback that a second and say that I have said this before in the previous part of this series as well. The relatability factor is so important. That's, I think, what Stuart is getting at. If I was to put out a post tomorrow that just said, I did this case today, it would flop because it would be interesting to about 24 people, and most people would just look at that and say, well, I'm not massively interested. Whereas last week I posted about my wedding anniversary. I posted about my daughter's first day at nursery, and those things both went viral. Over 100,000 views, thousands of engagements on it, because that's something that people understand. And the consequence of doing that is that I get an increase in engagement, which also filters into the direct messaging. And that's where then you pick up individual threads and you take conversations with people further. So the relatability aspect is really, really important. And that is what really works if you look on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, and it's interesting how I think the style of posts is changing on LinkedIn, and there's a lot more of this relatability. How does this relate to my own personal circumstances? And we all did look at the great pictures of the family on your post in the last couple of days. Okay, let's roll on to the next slide, if we may. Now, this slide, and I particularly want Sahar to talk about this. This slide looks at the pattern of engagement. I'm not quite sure whether it's over for an individual or overall. In terms of, you know, when it's all about when should you put out your post, and when do you get best engagement from your post, and you know, I believe, and Sahar's a real expert on this, I believe the time of day and the speed of response is ranks you or pushes you up, or the algorithm works to push you up and get a better reach of your post. Sahar, you're a wizard on this sort of stuff. Do you want to tell us what your thinking is and your interpretation of timing of post, and what is important in terms of speed of response?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in that. The first is what is an algorithm? I certainly had no idea, even up until a couple of years ago. And somebody explained it to me in fairly rudimentary terms. It's essentially the way in which the platform itself determines how relevant and how important what you've created is. Now, that may not sound massively significant, but it's hugely significant, because if it decides that what you have put out there is important and is relevant, it will put it at the top of every single person's feed in your network, which just means that they're automatically more likely, firstly, to see it, and of course, they're more likely to engage with it. Now, incidentally, as an aside, if you have a premium LinkedIn account, that also means the algorithm will automatically treat your content more favorably and push it further. That is part of what you pay for. So if that is something you are looking at, my view is that investment, as against potential ROI, is well worth it. In terms of what you're looking at the moment, I have to confess I've not seen this before, but it doesn't surprise me at all, because it fits with what I understood the case to be, which is that Wednesday and Thursday tend to be the best days to post anyway, because midweek I think people are just kind of more inclined to open the app and have a flick through. But generally, and again, it's common sense, the best time to post is going to be in the morning. That's because, again, people are potentially flicking on the app whilst they're on a commute, or whilst they're waiting for their laptop to fire up, whatever it is. It's then just, oh, I'll just have a quick look at LinkedIn. And if you've posted in that window, then they're more likely to see it. And similarly, if you post in that window and the traction begins at that point, it's going to last the entirety of the day. The last thing that was mentioned there, which is also important, is that the algorithm treats your post differently in the first 2 hours than it does for the rest of its existence. So that means that any engagement you get in the first 2 hours is essentially amplified. It's louder and it's pushed harder. So anytime someone comments on one of your posts within the first 2 hours, you should engage with their comment. You should respond, even if it's just to like it and say, I agree. That will do the job, and it will continue to push the engagement of your post.
Wow, that's quite interesting, isn't it? If one is being not so much cynical, but using LinkedIn, as you say, to amplify your post and get over a particular point. If you've got a network of colleagues who can share your post or like your post, that will give that amplification, which is interesting. I must admit, I don't know what other people do, but I seem to have got into a morning routine, particularly when I've been home working, of get downstairs. The first job is to get the kettle on. Second job is to get the tea bag into the teacup, waiting for the kettle. And while it boils, you know, I have a sort of a routine of BBC News, the weather forecast. LinkedIn is, you know, how many new notifications I've got on LinkedIn, and I'm scanning through that during the time it takes for the kettle. I always fill the kettle up absolutely to the top, so I get as much possible time to scan those things. I might check the bank statement as well. So I think it's almost it becomes part of the daily routine, almost, just to scan it. And for me, I'm scanning it at that 7 to 7:15 type time slot. Stuart, any comments from you? When do you tend to do your posts, Stuart?
Oh, I guess it really all depends on where I am. So typically, I'll be taking lots of photos when I'm out and about, and if I'm on the move, I might then do the post when I'm say back home. But it really is morning, noon, and night. I tend to, like you, well, probably 6:15 rather than 7:15 when I'm doing the coffee. I'll have a little look at and the news and the weather, and then yeah, I try to be quite spontaneous when I'm doing my posts, and I try to find there to be something a little bit quirky. So typically the posts are when I am out and about. I've taken a photo of something. Invariably, it's non-work related. I'll try and find some kind of a work angle to it, but what I'm trying to do is get people to follow me on my journey, in my world. So I don't do anything like Instagram or Twitter. I don't really think those are quite suited for me. So LinkedIn tends to, most of my world is visible on LinkedIn, I would say. I'm probably a little bit different in that respect.
All right, brilliant, and a little bit more ad hoc, but I think it's maybe a message for us here is to understand if we're going to use LinkedIn quite strategically. Then I think what we're finding from this little chat is that that engagement midweek and early in the day is that bit stronger, and therefore if we are looking to use it more strategically.
I think so, because the world has changed, and because the old ways of working, certainly business, because of something called a pandemic, has changed a lot of our routines. And that typically we'd probably wake up at 6:15 or 7:15 and have our coffee and then get ready to go to work. Probably a lot of people are not doing that nowadays. So then you probably find if you are spending a lot of time at home, working from home, what opportunities do you now get to use LinkedIn for the benefit of your fans or your network? So I think that's why we've probably got to start being a little bit more creative as well. I mean, I've always been creative anyway, but I think to make it more interesting or appealing for others, it is to do something different. Perhaps just to take that photo of your kettle or something, just something that's in your mind that you want to get out to the world. Frame it with something that is part of your world at the moment, like just making a cup of tea or coffee.
I'll bear
Just
that
tell
one.
people the brand of tea or coffee that you're making, or just anything that has a slight angle to that which you want to say.
Indeed. Let's move on, because I want to pick up on that thread. Just to move on to the next slide, if we could. So being a bit creative, let's just talk about video. There's some stats here in terms of the role of video compared with a static frame, and I think we're seeing this on all social media platforms these days. But video consumption on LinkedIn is growing very, very rapidly. Mobile devices are far superior when it comes to using video. I think Sahar, you've used video quite a bit recently. We're people spending more time, 3 times more looking at video compared with static images. You've got 6 times more reaction, 30% more comments. Sahar, what's your view on video as opposed to a still?
I think the old adage that variety is the spice of life has not changed when you translate it to social media. What the current slide displays is that different things will be treated differently, though. And if you want to really have kind of sustained engagement, you need to, like almost anything in life, vary what you're putting and how you're presenting it. So I think there is definitely a place for pictures. About 18 months ago, somebody suggested to me and showed me various statistics around how LinkedIn was treating video content. What I would say is that changes every few months. Every social media platform's algorithm changes. So video might be flavor of the quarter now, but it won't be the case in 6 months' time. However, I took the view that I'd incorporate video into what I do, and I do that every week. and that has now developed its own traction. So every Friday morning, I will post a TikTok video, and that video will almost always be something insightful or interesting or philosophical from that particular platform. Interestingly enough, I've had a lot of people message me over that 18-month period saying this stuff is really interesting, but we'd like to hear from you directly. Would you be willing to do that? And so this Friday just gone, for the first time ever, because I found it slightly, I mean, I had my own trepidations around it, but I recorded my own video last Friday, and that did pretty much just as well as any of the other videos that I've posted. So creating your own content on video, which I think won't be for everyone, and it's taken me a very long time to approach doing it even once, is one way. But videos are definitely something which people enjoy. Just remember that the attention span is limited though. Do not go over about 90 seconds because people will just get bored. That's one of the reasons why the TikToks are so user friendly, because it's 20-30 seconds, and also make sure it has subtitles. I saw a statistic recently that said 92%, I mean, it may just be made up, but it struck me as true for me anyway, about 92% of videos viewed online are viewed without sound. If that is true, then it's extraordinary, but let's just say that it's 40%. Just think about how often you will view videos without sound, and then apply that to someone viewing what you're putting out there. It needs to have subtitles, otherwise people will just think, oh, I can't find my headphones, I'm not turning it up here now, and that's it. You've lost their engagement.
It's quite appropriate, that, isn't it? With a lot of well, one would think that going forward, at least, that a lot of the social media content is going to be consumed in a public place, and I think we do get a bit cheesed off when we hear all that background noise of other people's phones and chatter and everything going on. So you're right. This idea of some subtitling, I think, it makes sense in terms of what you're saying. Sahar, while I've got your attention, what's your what's your commercially? I mean, ultimately, we're keen to get the this business this interaction with people converted in leads, ultimately clients and bills and everything else. What's your experience of actually commercializing or monetizing, I think is probably the right word, your LinkedIn activity into new accounts?
My experience has been that you have to do the legwork. So the post is not where it ends, the post is where it starts. Somebody who you think could be a prospect, who you think could be a client, who you think might be able to use your services or works in the same space as you then need to direct message that person and engage with them and have a coffee with them and possibly deliver some training for them. And then that's how your relationship develops. And year on year, I'd say this last 12-month period, direct instructions, I was at a partners conference yesterday talking about this. We've had just shy of £300,000 in direct instructions through LinkedIn in the last 12 months. So that is a product of following up on those posts. As I say, and I'm keen to stress, it could be, if you wanted it to be, it could be the only way in which you use it. It's not the only way in which I use it because I have other interests, but it is incredibly important for that. And even between the first session that I did with Quill and this one, I've been engaging with a firm of solicitors who attended the first call. We're delivering some training for them later on this month, and I've spoken to a number of solicitors at that firm about work that we can do for them. So it's just about making sure that you follow up, and that's no different to how I was taught business development in general. It's not the meeting you're having now, it's the next one, and making sure that people are engaged with you. So if you want to convert it, I think you need to think about the fact that the conversion into an actual viable commercial lead is something that will take place in private. If you equate LinkedIn to a networking event, then you'll have that initial meeting, you'll have that initial discussion, but the real business is then going to happen probably either in a side room or a few days later somewhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is the old breakfast meeting, networking event. Be it a sort of, as you say, a breakfast meeting or an evening, 6 o'clock meeting or whatever it might be, event, and it just moved it over into this different format. Stuart, I think you might have a slightly, I don't. My guess is, knowing you as well as I do, is that you're probably generating more business from LinkedIn than you realise. But do you actually go and do anything proactive to try and generate real business?
Not really. I mean, our business comes from very specific roots. But what I would say is, for me, the slide that says converting attention, I would say I'm generating attention. And for me, that's what I'm really getting out of LinkedIn. It's just building my profile that little bit further. Perhaps then when I do meet a new professional introducer and then I connect with them on LinkedIn, that's a good way for them to see a little bit more about me, because they might say, Stuart, okay, who are you? Why should I give you my work? But if I say to them, well, Google me or go onto LinkedIn and see me, you can see a little bit about my life, and they'll go, oh, yes, I see. That's interesting. You've got a personality, because a lot of my work involves dealing with personalities and people, and I think for them to see that side of me, which is not always a business side, then I think that will help convert indirectly. But as I'm principally using it for just remove the word converting, just attention. I'm just an attention seeker. What can I say?
Well, I must admit, it's interesting how you and I had a dialogue. I think it was probably offline, in terms, it was on email rather than on LinkedIn, where we were talking about my daughter's flat, and you gave me comfort that the developer that built her flat, which is going to remain nameless in this forum, was a builder that you respected. And I think a lot of, I thought, okay, I got two things out of that. Firstly, I got good. Well, we bought the right, or we, whoever, bank and mum and dad and all that, the right flat was purchased. And secondly, Stuart knows his stuff. And so I came away from that thinking, oh, okay, the dialogue spun out of LinkedIn, and it was, this guy knows what he's talking about, and I can go back to him, if ever she sells the flat. I think, oh, okay, who do I talk to? I need I want a solicitor that knows the conveyancer, that knows the area, knows what's going on. Okay, he's one to go for. So I think I think you get more business from LinkedIn than you realise. But
that's really important, because one of the key things about it is just about being in people's consciousness. It's about people being aware. So a lot of people, this partners conference I just attended, it's the first time I've met some colleagues that I've been working with for a year because of COVID, and a lot of them felt like they knew me, and they knew aspects of what I do and how I've done it and what I have been doing, because they see it every day. And
Yep.
Similarly, I suppose more directly to what you're saying, I refer things to other people all the time on LinkedIn, because people in my network approach me and say, I've got this issue in relation to family law. My firm doesn't do family law, so I can instantly refer that out. So who's going to be in my mind? It's going to be a family practitioner who either engages in what I put out there, or whose content I'm familiar with and I see, or I need someone to do some conveyancing. Again, it's the same thing, but you have to be visible, so that when somebody who may be completely unknown to you, who doesn't actually engage with you, but they see what you put out there and they see how you comment, and they get a completely random question from a friend, they think, well, I don't know, but I know that that guy will have an idea, or she will definitely have someone who she can send it to, and then you refer it on.
And it's extremely important to add to that is we shouldn't be selfish or greedy in as much as we're hoping to get something new out of it, something additional out of it. Use it as a form of consolidation as well. We've got all these connections, we've got our fans, we've got our friends, we've got our associates or whoever. Share the things with those people you're already connected with. Share your knowledge, share your experiences, share your day, share your dinner with them as well. Be generous with those people that you are already connected with. That's what I find the most fun thing about it as well. And similarly, I like to see what other people are up to as well, because of course you've got things like Facebook and everything else, which are much more personal, and you probably only see on LinkedIn things which are fairly two-dimensional, business related. I want to see more than that, and some people might not be comfortable about sharing. You can be very careful and selective about what you do share. Well, that should be on any medium really, but I think one can be a little bit bolder and braver to not just simply let it be about business. The fact that we are already connected means that we are human beings as well. Let's share something a little bit quirky, a little bit personal, and then I think that builds the connections you've already got.
Okay, brilliant, good. I think we ought to move on. I feel a little bit like the sort of BBC Sports channel or something. I'm lucky enough to have a minder behind the scenes who keeps sending me messages on WhatsApp telling me what's happening. I believe that the online chat is not working, folks. For those of you that are listening into the call, if you do want to try raising your hand using the little icon on the top of the screen, then I'll try and pick that up and deal with your query. Or indeed, if you're feeling really brave, by all means unmute yourself and pop in a question. But in the meantime, back to the slides and what we've got in front of us, and this is a slide that Yvonne showed us when we did the first round of this particular webinar, which was about the way to construct, or her recommendation at least, in terms of the way to construct a post. And what she's got here is the concept of an interesting hook. One of the biggest mistakes I made, someone being very humble, through to the story, the lesson, and the takeaway. And it's quite a neat way of thinking about how to construct your post. And Sahar, you're somebody that's constructing these things all the time. I mean, firstly, do you buy into Yvonne's model, or would you do it differently? Is this an approach that you take when you're writing a post?
I've not seen it before. I suppose that's what you're sharing now. The one on the left. That is from, when is that from? That's from Monday morning. Yep. So that's 2 days ago. I'm not sure if you could say that sort of opening line, because I have used that opening line approach before, and I do use it sometimes because you do want to draw people in, but you also don't want to become known as someone who sort of engages in clickbaiting, because clickbaiting is seen as really quite unnecessary, and now sort of attracts its own kind of derision. So I think you've got to choose an opening line which is strong. So if you take that one, which you've screenshotted, I'm not sure that's a particularly punchy opening, but it is going to be interesting because right now people are very interested in flexible working, and it's the kind of the topic of the day.
Yep. And
that type of thing is going to get interest and attention. And what you'll see there as well is the use of hashtags. There isn't, well, I would suggest anyway, there isn't an excessive use of hashtags, but the point of using hashtags for anyone who is unfamiliar with it is each one of those hashtags has its own following, and you can click on the hashtag and see how many people follow it. Particular ones like networking, social media, business, mentoring, management, they have millions of followers. And if you get trending in one of those, then your content will also be viewed by people who are following that. So it's important to know which hashtags to use and how to use them as well. But yeah, I think there's definitely scope for that as a formula, but you don't want to become too formulaic, because then people will just think, right, well, that's how they write and that's all that is. So I'm not going to stop and read that anymore, as opposed to knowing, okay, so what she writes is always a bit different. It's always a bit interesting. I'll stop and see what she's saying this time.
Okay, brilliant, good. So Stuart, what prompted you to, or what's behind your thinking of the of your post on the screen here, the little car up on the jacks?
That was quite a difficult one to post, because I thought, should I really share this with the world? Because that's sort of entering into something which is quite personal and probably quite vulgar. But I thought that little thing on the ramp represented something. It represented part of my journey, for no pun intended. It was something that I tangible part of the achievement, the sacrifice of work, and it was telling people about my journey before then, that how it is I got into law, and basically a bit of a mentoring element to it, which is to say, work hard and do whatever it is you want to do it well, do it because you want to do it, and with sacrifice and hard work and patience, you can achieve anything. Because if I could do it, anybody could do it. That was basically my thinking. I'm just a poor boy from Bromley who happens to have done well, but I wasn't born a partner of a law firm. It's been a long journey, and there's been lots of people that have helped me along that way. So this was as much for them as well, for them to see this little kid from Bromley he's done well. And so it sort of, it wasn't meant really to be showing off, or it might be perceived as that. The point was that, you know, I think in business, in life, you can achieve anything is possible to achieve, but it does require hard work, and that was it really.
Okay, brilliant. Right, let's just move on to the next slide. And I think before we get into the key takeaways, what if I was to say to well, both of you, I don't know who wants to go first, you know, what would be your number one recommendation to our audience today, in terms of what would you take away in terms of your course of action in making better use of LinkedIn? Who wants to go first? I could say we could do it alphabetically. I'm not quite sure whether it's S or S, Stuart or Sahar. Stuart's got his hand up. Go for it, Stuart.
I think I'll probably have a different answer, which is that if you are already using personal social media a lot, try to level up and use this more. And secondly, this is probably the most difficult thing for people, perhaps certain people, you know, if you're shy, if you're nervous, if you don't really want to have a public platform, don't worry. As I said, you can be very, very careful about what you share, and it could just not even be pictures, just slides. It can even not be slides, just a statement, just something. Start with baby steps. I'm a fairly recent convert to social media. I mean, 5 years ago, probably I wasn't even using Facebook or anything. It took me a while because I'm probably a bit more of a sort of a different generation, that I'm not using TikTok and all those kind of things. It took me a while to get onto it, and I dipped my toe in the water a bit. Now I love it. I just find it very, very interesting. So just be brave if you're a fairly shy person, and just dip your toe in the water, but try and use it as much as you can, because you'll get as much out of it as you put into it.
Perfect. Good. Sahar, what would you add to that?
No, I'd endorse that. I mean, I think the right answer is really just to engage, because you can't get anything out of a platform like this unless you are engaging in some way. Now, that doesn't have to be what I do. Very, very few people would ever share the things that I share. That's one of the reasons why it works, because it's on the rare side. People just don't have the comfort doing that, and that's absolutely fine. That isn't a boilerplate, and there isn't a boilerplate for how you do it. But what you can do in, and I think this is reflecting what Stuart was saying, is just engage. If you see a post from somebody you know, or you see a post from someone you don't know, and you like it, then click like and leave a comment, because that person will see it, they may engage with it, but everybody else who's seen it will also potentially see it, they may engage with you, and then you can decide based on how that interaction has gone, okay, I feel comfortable doing this, I'm going to do this a little bit more regularly. Or actually, based on what I've read here, I think I could come up with a better post on this theme, and then create your own. But that's entirely right. Just take the baby steps and start with that mantra of, I need to engage. If I'm going to get anything out of this platform, I need to engage, and then start working out how you want to engage.
Okay, excellent. I must admit, it's quite ironic, isn't it? I add a few comments and likes and things on my social media, on my LinkedIn profile, and a tiny bit on Facebook. I'm absolutely paranoid of putting any comment in the village WhatsApp group, for fear of, it's almost the shyness bit of, I've got over 2,500 business contacts that I'm happy to engage with, but I'm frightened of saying the wrong thing in case I upset my neighbour down the road. That's one of the beauty. What I'm really getting at is one of the beauties of social media is you can just start gently and grow from there, and you're not going to get chastised by somebody in the pub.
One extra thing, which I think is just suddenly coming to my head, which I should mention: don't be afraid to connect. So forget posting for the moment. Don't be afraid to try and connect with somebody. So certain people, I mean, I can be a little bit shy at times, if you can believe it. And sometimes certain people's profiles that I've seen on LinkedIn, I thought, oh God, they'll never accept a connection from me, and they have. I thought, oh, wonderful. And I think that should be the thing. One shouldn't be snobby about LinkedIn, and if you are, then you shouldn't be on it. So that's my view.
Okay, brilliant. Okay.
One final thing, which is potentially linked to that WhatsApp point that you made, and I made this point last time, and I make it pretty much any time when somebody talks to me about social media and the stuff that I put out there in particular. It doesn't matter, but remember, anything that you put out on social media is potentially available in perpetuity. Not because, well, actually I've put it out, so I've got control of it and I'll delete it. The second, and I mean the nanosecond it is posted, someone could have screenshotted it, and regardless of what you do after that moment, it is now somewhere else. So understand that and be conscious and aware of that. That should inform your decisions around what comments you write, around what you put out there. And I try myself to always remember that, because I think it's just very important to remember that's the world in which we live. And the reason something like WhatsApp is so important in the context, I think, of what Julian's saying is WhatsApp feels like a very different platform and dimension, and it's private. If someone screenshots it and puts it online and you've said something flippant or something jokey which is taken out of context, that's then a whole different set of potential problems.
And moreover, the fact that the two of the speakers here are lawyers, the audience here are lawyers. Got to remember client confidentiality as well. And I get the occasional high-profile client. There's one in particular. I said, "Oh look, I'd just love a photo with you on LinkedIn. Do you mind? I got his express permission." And he said, "Yeah, that's fine." And but anything else that there's something topical you're working on, don't mention anything that could possibly lead back to that client. I know you're probably all rolling your eyes at this and saying, "Well, of course, Stuart," but I think the temptation can be there if it is a client that you wish to mention. Be very vague if you're talking about a case that is relevant, that could be useful, but that could not in any way go back to the clients. That's something I'm very, very careful about.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Stuart. Right, I've got the producer in my ear telling me what I need to do, which is to go to the final contact slide. So I think we've had a fantastic dialogue with Sahar and Stuart over the last 50 minutes or so, and just chatting away, hearing their comments, I think is a great format. I haven't seen anybody pop up any questions anywhere or come off mute or whatever. So I am going to probably draw things to a close. However, you know, you do have two people here from different backgrounds who have got real first-hand experience and are more than happy to share their experiences with you. And of course, some of the background to this is from Yvonne, who is an ex-LinkedIn employee and a LinkedIn trainer. So we will share this video with you. If you need these contact details, either scribble them down off the screen in front of you, or take a photograph of this this screen with these contact details on. Failing that, you will get a copy of this recording, or a link to the recording, I should say, to use the right terminology, where you can speed up to the end and contact Sahar and Stuart. You know, that they will, I'm sure, be glad to give you their time and attention, be it on a LinkedIn matter or anything else. You know, a conveyance or a matter that requires Sahar's professional input, or indeed Yvonne as a LinkedIn trainer as well. And of course, don't forget, you know, when you go and search for these guys, if you haven't already done so, on LinkedIn, you know, Stuart and Sahar and Yvonne, connect with them, and then you will start to see what they are posting, and then you can like or otherwise, and start your journey of getting better engagement, and ultimately it's part of your marketing toolkit. So thanks, folks, for listening in. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Sahar, and I do hope that you will be able to join us again at a future webinar on a completely different topic. Cheers for now. Enjoy your afternoons. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.